continuing the bouncing ball. So this is part 2. We will animate. So I'm going to switch to the animation tab. It just makes it easier here to do animation, because you do have a timeline that is preset for you. You get to see your camera view on this side and then your working camera on this side. All right, so we're going to select the ball right here and then start with our setup. So I will create this animation, and I'm going to mention when you shouldn't be following me and just watch. All right, the reason for that is there's going to be a lot of setup changes with the animation. So I would show you first why it doesn't work, and then I'm going to mention that, okay, now follow along, because then this is the correct way of doing it. Okay, so we're no longer just going to show you how step by step how it's actually being done. You will actually see all the issues and whatnot, and then you'll be able to follow along, knowing why we do the things we do in animation. All right, so to kind of explain first, timeline is basically it is just like any other timeline. This is where you time your animation, where you position things. By default in our timeline, we start at 1 and end at 250. So we are, by default, we are animating 24 frames per second. We will change how we see our timeline to make it easier for us, and then also set up our ball, and make sure that you have your numpad on, and I'm in your sidebar, and then go to item. This is another feature that we will actually use, where we could see our object. We don't want our object to be floating or sank right there, so that's very important that we do that. Okay, so the first setup we want to do is let me save this file, and then let's open what our goal is. Okay, I'm gonna go where the bouncing ball will be. All right, so let's take a look here, and I'm going to just press. All right, so this is what you're gonna do. This is what we plan to do. All right. Very simple. So we're going to start really basics. Okay, we're not going to use any type of rigging or parenting or null help or anything like that. It's just going to be straight up transform tools. Okay, and then we will go back to this and enhance our setup, so it makes our life easier, and basically no rigging, and then get more into I would say not a very basic, absolute basic beginner setup. Okay, so what we're going to do is strictly basic, all transform tools. So this is what we want. If you take a look at it, we added some principles of animation, so we're not even going to mention that here, that we are incorporating those. We're just going to kind of make it look like what it is, and then we go back to our lessons for the principles of animation, explaining why we added those things, okay, and what those things are. So most of this you just don't know what they're called. Okay, so all right, so that's what we want. So this is just looping, okay, and as you can see here, there is no loss of energy. All right, so when it goes back from 1 and then it goes back to 24, it's the same height. Okay, so it just makes it easier for us to kind of visualize a simple animation that just loops. So it just repeats a 1 second animation that keeps going forever. All right, we're not even looping or cycling the animation here. It's just my playback is from 1 to 24 and just cycles it. Okay, and we added some simple kind of deformation right there, to kind of squash the ball a little bit, so on and so forth. So we'll get to those, but this is the target right here. All right, and then now let me go back to the previous one. All right, here it is, and this is what we're animating. I think my camera is just a little bit angled right here, but that's fine, because that's basically exact same setup. All right, so the first thing we need to do is work on our timeline, and we need to change this. Normally you could put 0 to 23 or 1 to 24. Doesn't really matter, right? So our starting is frame 1. Our ending is on frame 24. So change 250 right here. Type in 24 and press enter. As you can see, the area that we're working on is highlighted right here. And we get to see all the way to 250. So that's a waste of space. So I'm going to click drag this. Right? I want to make sure my screencast is on. So middle click, drag it to pan, and then I'm going to scroll my mouse to zoom. Okay, so I get to see 1 to 24 here. You know, gigantic, right? So next is that we want to make sure that we name this sphere right here. We're just going to call this one ball. So this is the Pixar textured ball. We're just going to call it ball. All right, and our setup is it's starting here at the bottom. We could move it to the top, doesn't really matter. As long as we have a point of reference, okay? I'm also going to hide the camera here for now, okay? So we don't see it here, and all the lights, okay? Maybe maybe 2 of those. Okay, we can still see stuff. As long as we can see them, we'll turn those on so that they don't get in the way here. Let me see, turning that on. Okay, we can still see it right here. So that's fine, okay? I'm just turning those off. I left the default light, so if you guys didn't leave that, you might want to leave at least one light open here. It's just so that they don't get in the way, okay? Another thing is that we don't want to accidentally select any of the floor and the baseboard right here. So I'm going to go here to my outliner. I'm going to click on this little filter icon right here, and I'm going to turn on selectability, okay? Selectability right here simply means if we uncheck that, we will not accidentally select them and then move them by accident. So I'm just going to uncheck all the lights, the camera too. We want to keep that in there, you know, and then definitely might want to rename this one. This is our, you know, room. We're just going to call that room. And this one right here, that's the baseboard. So just kind of naming those. All right, now I'm going to uncheck baseboard and the room. Okay, so now, and the light also. So now we can't select anything here but the ball. Okay, so we're basically foolproofing our scene here so you guys don't end up selecting a bunch of stuff. Okay, all right, so the other thing too is that when I go to my sidebar item right here, this ball has a scale value because we did shrink it when we first got it. And then we also have some location value. All right. So we know from previous video that we can zero this out or change scale to 1 because you can't have it at 0 because otherwise it'll disappear. If we go to object, apply, and then let's say I click on scale, all right, it changes it as if this is the original object, right? So it's like 1 to begin with. So what about for locations? If I go to object and then apply location, okay, what happens is that it puts it back location-wise, the pivot point to the creation original location, because it used to be here and then we drag it down, we shrunk it, okay? So that's not what we want. I'm going to click undo, okay? I'm going to do object, apply, location to deltas. So what happens is that it keeps the pivot point right here, okay? And then it zeroes out my location. All right, so, okay, so, well, I did mention, well, you shouldn't be following. Yeah, follow only up to the apply scale, and then don't worry about the location right here because I'm about to do the animation here, and there's all sorts of things that will go wrong, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's just dive into the animation. Do not follow this, just watch along. Okay, so I know for sure the position now that I click on object, apply delta, it is now here at the bottom. So if I ever want to go back to the bottom, I don't have to guess like, okay, am I there? No. I just type in 0 on Z and I know for sure I'm at the bottom. So that's why we did that. We did that for scale in case I wanted to scale this and squash it. Then I wanted to, hey, what does the round look like? The original shape, then it's 1, 1, 1, right? So that's why we apply that as well. Okay, so let's start this animation. So it's super simple. It's just going to go from top to bottom, then go up exact same position, right? So this down position here at 0, is basically our timing, right? We need that for the timing. So it's going to start at 1 at the top, then it'll go down to, which is the middle of 124 would be 12. So 12 will be at the bottom, okay? And then at 24, it goes back up 24 frames. Easy enough, right? So let's start with that, okay? So I'm going to go on frame 1. So if you haven't seen the basic keyframing steps for any animation, all right, we have 4 steps. First is to select the object you want to animate. Second position is to position your time. Third is transform it. And then last one is to keyframe it, okay? So let's start with that. So if you haven't seen that video, please watch that, and then it's just a repeating process from there. Okay, so first step, select the object you want to animate. So I have the ball selected. Next is position your time. We want it on frame 1, right? That's a start. And then number 3 is transform your object. All right, so we want this. All right, so I'm basing this, which you can see here. I'm using my move tool here, so I can precisely move it along the z-axis only. If I'm not using this tool and I just press G, let's say, there's no guarantee that that went straight. Okay, you can do G and then Z, have it go like that, and that would be correct. Okay, however, if you have this tool on, you can just grab this one, and you know for sure you are not rocking this left and right or front and back. If you're in a 3D camera, you're just moving it up and down. So basically on the camera, I'm pretty happy with that height. You know, we're kind of doing rule of third kind of. Okay, right there is good. Okay, so that's my frame 1. So I went select the object, move the time, transform the object, and the last one is keyframe this. So how do we keyframe in Blender? So the easiest one is just to press I, it's an ice cream, and then select what type of transform you want. So we are doing movement here, so it's all location, right? So if I click location here, it keyframes it. So that's step 4 in our step process, right? However, when you do that, it doesn't select a particular axis. We're only animating Z, but we got X and Y, which are static keyframes, okay? So I'm going to click undo. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be precise here. So instead of just pressing I and then selecting location, okay, I'm going to go right here where it says Z axis. This is location, right? Z right here, okay? I'm going to right click this and then insert a single keyframe. Because if I press insert keyframes here, it's the same thing as pressing I and location again, okay? So very important, we go single keyframe, and that's it. It changed to this kind of olive color, signifying that it's keyframe. We also got our keyframe right here on the ball and location Z, so you can see right here. All right, easy enough, right? So we know for a fact that this is going to go up in frame 24 later, and then if we have that value right there, we can just type it in, or we can just copy stuff here. But we're going to do this kind of step by step. All right, so next one, step 1 to 4 again. Select the object. Okay, it's still selected. Step 2, position your time. So that will be frame 12. On frame 12, step 3 is transform. Where do we want this ball in frame 12? Down here. We don't know if it's actually down there, but we remember, oh, that's actually pretty good. It's on 0. All right, remember it was on 0 because we applied the delta. And you're not supposed to be following along, right? You're just watching, because we're going to redo all this and do it the correct way, all right? So there it is. So I can just type in 0 actually right there, and we know for a fact that that's the original position, okay? What is step 4? Keyframe. So I'm going to right click here, insert single keyframe, and that's keyframe. All right, so now do the 4 steps again. Select the object. It's still selected. Step 2, position the time. So I'm going to go frame 24. Okay, so this is our timing. Our timing for the ball is on frame 1. It's at the top. Frame 12 is at the bottom. And then frame 24, it's at the top again. Exact same position, so we can cycle it. Okay, so I can move this up like so, but not really knowing where that information is. So another easy one to just kind of, since we're doing this kind of like the long way, I'm just going to go to frame 1 right there and then pay a visit to 1.1707. 1.1707. I go right here. 1.1707. Okay, and then I'm going to right click, insert that keyframe, and then voila, there it is. So there's our bounce ball. Let's watch it. I'm going to tap the space bar. All right. Something is up, right? So let's say this is a ping pong ball. It doesn't need to squash. So we got that part, right? But something's wrong here. As you can see, it's not bouncing correctly. It looks like it's bouncing from the top, okay? So it's supposed to accelerate going down close to the, terminal velocity, whatever that may be. It's supposed to go slow, right? Here, slowly falling, because when you drop something, it's not super fast. It's slowly falling, then it builds up speed. So it's supposed to accelerate around here, okay? And then when it hits the ground, it's supposed to bounce up really fast also, and then go over there. All right, so, but let's worry about that after. So we are just kind of noticing what's wrong with the bounce of the ball. And that is what is wrong, okay? And it's not a ping pong ball, it's a rubber ball. We talk about that on the modeling part. And so we have to abide by the property or what this thing is, okay? So now what we want to do with this is simply add the other elements here. So now we are done with our position. We are now going to do our scaling, right? We want to flatten this. All right. So first thing is we have issue with the flat, right? So we can't possibly make this thing flat if it's only on the ground for one frame. You can't squeeze this in one frame. There's not enough time because frame 13 is already going up. Look. All right. So we need this ball to stay on the ground longer than one frame. Okay. So what we want to do with that is do our forceps of animation. So when do you want this to kind of be on the ground? Okay, let's decide. Let's go with frame 10. Let's say on frame 10, it hits the ground already. And then from 10, 11, 12, it stays on the ground. So we can actually scale it. So we can squeeze it in, okay, squash in. And then from 12, 13, 14, we squash out. So it needs to be on the ground 10 to 14. We can just leave 10 right, 12 right here, which is fine as well. So if I grab my keys right here, they turn yellow, okay? That one is white, okay? I'm going to press G and slide that to 10. So that means now this ball hit the ground now at 10, okay? So if I play this, it'll look still bad, but it doesn't stay on the ground, right? It leaves after 10. It goes 11. It's already going up. So what we want to do is we simply want to copy the keyframes of 10 to 14 to tell Blender, hey, stay on the ground. 10 to 14, I'm giving you the exact same keys. All right? There's several ways to do this. I can go to 14 right here, go to Z-axis, type in 0, right-click, and then insert single keyframe. And then, well, guess what happens? It's on the ground, 10, 14, which gives us a chance to squash it, right? Another way, I'm going to click undo, is to Shift D and move that to the right. Since the value is the same from 10 to 14, that would be the same thing as me going here, typing 0 and entering keyframe, and voila, it does the same thing. All right. So now we have prepared the ball so that we give it opportunity to actually be on the ground so we can actually do the squash. All right. So now here's the dilemma. I'm going to switch my tool to scale. We want to squash it this way and that way, right? So on and so forth, and to the back as well. The problem with this, you can already tell, it's not squashing where it's supposed to squash, right? So we need to squash this from 10 to 12, round ball, and then frame 12, we squash it, and then from 12 to 14, we unsquash it so that it becomes a ball again, all right, or a round sphere, okay? The problem is this. Watch when I do my squash on frame 12, okay? Because on frame 10, do we need to keyframe the squashing? Of course, because otherwise, if you don't keyframe on 10, it will start squashing from 1. Okay, so you have to control where the timing is. So the timing for the scaling is 10, 12, and 14. Remember, our timing for the location Z-axis is 1, 12, 24 initially, and then it became 1, 10, 14, and 24, right? So for squashing, we only want to squash it starting from frame 10 to 12, then squash out again. All right, so let's do that. So on frame 10, okay, the ball is still selected. I changed my tool to squash, scale, sorry. I'm on frame 10, so the next step is transform. So I'm just gonna go here, kind of simplify this. I'm gonna go Z-axis, okay, scale it. All right, there it is, okay. We have a problem, right, because it's lifted on the floor. Let's not worry about that. Let's just do our keyframing 4 steps and worry about the other stuff. So that might be a little too much. I'm gonna go with 0.8 on the Z-axis, okay, and then I'm going to right-click this and keyframe it, right? But which position are we supposed to be when we actually squash it? We have to be on 12. So this one is actually just 1, right? There's no animation on 10. Remember that, because we always have this issue. People start at 10, so on and so forth. But anyway, on the next round, I will drill that into you guys so you don't do it. So on frame 10, Z-axis, right-click it, insert single keyframe. Basically, we're just telling Blender, hey, I'm just going to keyframe you to start squashing, but don't squash yet, okay? So we know for a fact that if we go to frame 14 also, it's going to go back to the original shape, right? So I can just keyframe that, but I'm not going to do that so you see it kind of step by step, okay? So now here on Z-axis, okay, frame 12, we go 0.8. Okay, I'm going to type in 0.8. There it is. 0.8, right click, insert keyframe. Then we'll go to 14. We switch this back to 1. Insert single keyframe, and then let's take a look at our animation if I play it. All right, looking even terrible. Okay, it looks like it's just wobbling right there because it's in midair. All right, but we're just kind of fixing, we're just trying to do our scaling. All right, so what else can we scale? So that's just going up and down. So the ball will displace this. So if you make it shorter, then it will displace its volume sideways, right? So we can't just scale it along the Z. It needs to go wider, right? So if I'm going to move my camera a little bit like so, and we're on 10 and then 12. So when we go to frame 12, we also want to expand this along the X right here. Make it a little bit wider like so, okay? And then deeper as well. All right, but before we do that, let's go here to our frame 10, okay? Now this is where we just want to get a keyframe for 1 on everything. I can go here, this is the long way. I'm on frame 10, I can right click here, insert single keyframe, go to Y, all right, insert single keyframe, then I keyframe all those with no scaling, right? And then if I go to frame 12 right here, we can go here 1.2. So we're just kind of display, this is not correct actually, but we're just kind of making it, so we shrunk it 0.2 here and we're expanding it 0.2 on the X and Y. So it got wider. Okay, then I can do insert keyframe here, insert keyframe. All right, or I could have just also press I and then hit scale right here. It will keyframe all of those. So we'll do that for 14. So for 14, what is our value? It's supposed to be like 10 on the scale. So everything should be 1, 1, 1, right? So if I just want to keyframe all this, I just press I and then scale right there. It's the same thing as right-clicking single keyframe or right-click. Well, right now you can't because you can only delete the keyframe because we already keyframed. So now let's take a look. All right, terrible. Okay, so but we have kind of satisfied those scaling and transform. Now we got to do some fixing. All right, so the first problem is the bounce, right? It looks like it's bouncing from the top down, all right? It's slowing here. It's not supposed to slow here. It should accelerate. So we know we got to fix that. Part 2 is this. The scaling. Look at the scaling. It's happening in the middle. The pivot point of the ball is at the center. It shouldn't be, okay? Where is this supposed to be? On point of contact. So we should be scaling this down here, all right? We should be scaling it down here so that when we actually squash it, it squashes not from the middle, going top and bottom, but just from the top going down. So we need to fix this first, all right? So you can't do the scale without doing this first, all right? Otherwise, or you have to do a rig. But again, we're doing the very basics. We're just doing transform, all right? So now that you've seen what we plan to do and potential problem with this setup, that's why I didn't want you to follow along. I just want you to watch, and then we'll do it properly on the next run, okay? So we're almost done. We just actually have to fix those. The timing should be the same, okay? So let me stop this animation, okay? I'm just going to reopen it, okay? From the first one, don't save that, okay? And then let's now follow along, all right? So this is the part where you should be following along, all right? So first thing we did is change our length from 1 to 24. Then we went here, middle click drag, and then zoom with the scroll so that we could see 1 to 24. Right there is good enough. We get a lot of space right here, okay? And then we added selectability on the outliner right there, and then pretty much unselect everything except for the ball, right? Which I need to rename here because and we're gonna hide baseboard, camera, and all the other lights. I think that's what I did on the other one. So let me just name this real quick. That's the ball. This one is the baseboard. This one right here. Oh, I think I reversed it. Sorry. Okay, so let's take a look. Where's the spear? Okay, right there. Oh, what did I do? Oh yeah. Oh, what else was? I just turn all those things on. For some reason, it didn't work. Let's see. Ball, baseboard. Okay, that's correct. This one is the room. Okay, let's see here. So the room we want to see, but we don't want to accidentally select. Baseboard, we don't want to accidentally select and see. The ball we want to see and select. The area light, we don't want to accidentally select those and see for now. And the light as well, which is the default light, but we want to see it though. So it's the only thing that we could possibly accidentally select there and move, but it's the light. So camera, we don't want to select and see for now. Okay. And so we have the ball, we have the room. Okay. Now I can select this one. Okay. That's it. Okay. So now we have renamed everything, and then I made selectability on, and I just made those things disappear, hid them, and did uncheck the selectability as well so that we don't accidentally do that. So we changed our timeline to 1 to 24 as well. Okay. So first things first, remember when we did add apply object, we still have values on this one. All right. So that's the first thing we want to do before we change all of that is let's say we go to object, apply scale. We know that would work. Didn't change anything. It's now back to 1. We have issues with this because we have to do apply deltas, right? But before we do that, we want to make sure the bottom of the ball is where the pivot is. All right. So to do that, I'm going to go hit tab, go to edit mode. Okay. I'm going to go turn on my X-ray. All right. Let me see screencast right there. Okay. And I'm going to go to point mode. What I want to do is select the point down there. Okay. That point down there below. I'm in an X-ray mode. All right. And what I want is I want to go to mesh after that. And I want to snap. Okay. I want my 3D cursor. Where's the 3D cursor here? Okay. 3D cursor is right there. Okay. Because we're going to use that to position our pivot point. Okay. So I selected the very bottom point. Okay. And I went to mesh, snap, cursor to selected. So when I do that, the cursor selects, it snaps to that selection down there, the bottom of the ball. Okay, what is the importance of that? It's the next part right here. So when we go to object mode, okay, I can now tell my object, I want my set origin. Origin in Blender speak is your pivot point. This is your point of rotation or where the scaling happens, okay? All right, so set origin, we want origin to 3D cursor, right? So let me go to the front here so I can show you. Remember, there's where the, let me turn off X-ray. That's where the pivot point is, right? That's where our cursor is. So when we go here, set origin to 3D cursor, guess what? It went down there. So when we do our scaling, which the previous video has issue, now we fix that. Okay, so all I did, well, watch the video again. I don't want to explain it again, but that's what the first thing we need to do before we even animate this thing. Okay, the next thing here is we want to zero out the information on the location, right? So previously, this is what we did. Object apply location. All right, so what happened is that it resets it back on top. All that hard work to kind of pivot that. So I'm going to click undo. So your apply doesn't work here on location. You have to apply location to deltas. It will zero it out right here, but it will keep the pivot point where you set it. Okay, so remember, there's a difference between the two. So now we're almost, I think we're ready for everything. Okay, so now we can just do our timing. So we don't have to pretend here that the timing on this ball on the ground is on frame 12, because we know from the previous one, maybe before I ask you not to follow, is we have this on the ground from 10 and 14, right? So let's just do our timing here, right? So the ball is on top on frame 1 and 24. It's on the bottom at frame 10 and 14, all right? So let's do our 4 steps. First is select. Second is position the time. Third is transform the object, right? Transform the object. So we want the object on frame 1 to be up here. Probably that's good enough right there, okay? And then step 4 is to keyframe it. So that's on the Z-axis on the location. I'm going to right-click here, insert single keyframe. Yay. All right, so we also know the location on frame 24 is on the exact same location. So instead of copying and copying the number like what I did before, I can just go to frame 24 here, right click it here, insert single keyframe, and that will do the exact same thing. All right, because it's just the same information. When I play my thing, it's like nothing happens because we just told Blender, hey, be here on 1 and 24. When is it on the ground? Frame 10, correct? So I can lower this now. I move my time. So select the object first, position the time. There it is. Transform the object. So I can go like so, but there's no guarantee it's on the exact same position, or, we know for a fact we reset our delta. So 0 right here. I'm just going to type in 0, okay? And then right click, insert keyframe. There it is. Okay? And 10, we need it on the ground from 10 to 14 so we can do the squashing. So on frame 10, I can just type in 0. I can also, what did I do last time? I think I did select this and then Shift D, drag it to 14. That's what we did, right? So that's the same thing. Another way to do it is go fancy, okay? On frame 14, you can type in 0 right there, okay? And then right click, single keyframe. So it's the same thing, okay? So it's on the ground now. Yay! Is the bounds correct? Of course it's not, okay? That's for part 3 of the video. Okay, so it's still the wrong one, but at least we can now get a correct squashing, right? So from 10 to 12, 12 to 14, because we fixed the pivot point right there at the bottom. So here we go. So let's concentrate on 12 to 14, okay? So we know we need to scale this. XYZ, correct? So on X, on frame 10, what is our scaling? It's 1. We don't want it because on frame 9, it's still midair, right? On 10, it's on the ground. So it shouldn't be squashing on 10. It just landed. So it's going to squash from 10 to 12, okay? So, but we do need to keyframe what is the scaling on 10 because that's where we want it to start scaling. So it'll be 1 on XYZ. The fastest way to do it is to just press I and then hit scale. And voila, it keyframes all 3. If you want this the long way on the scale, you right click each one and then you click on insert single keyframe. You don't want to do that, right? So on frame 14 as well, what happens to it? Okay, on frame 15, that's when it goes up. So on frame 14, we want it from 10 to 12 squash in, 12 to 14 squashes out. So we want it as a ball, round shape like this on frame 14. So what do we do with the scale? Press I again and hit scale. So it's keyframe on X, Y, Z on the scale. If we play the animation, nothing happens again because we just made sure Blender knows frame 10 and 14, hey, be like a regular ball. All right. And now we go to 12. This is when it squashes. From 10 to 12, what happens to it? It squashes, right? So we went 0.8. Let's go 0.7. Let's exaggerate it a bit, okay? Or 0.75. 0.75 on the Z-axis. It went shorter. Now we want to make it go wider and deeper, right? So on the scale here, I'm going to go 1.25, okay? And then on the y-axis, 1.25. That is not a scientific volume expansion, okay? We're just trying to get 250 out of 750 and adding it to the other two, all right? So there it is, okay? That's on frame 12, so now we got to keyframe it, okay? So best way to do it is, easiest one is to I and then scale. It keyframes everything, or you got to do, if you want to do the classic way, insert keyframe on each one. So now let's watch this from 10, 12, and then 12 to 14. It goes back up to the regular ball and shape. And then, so now when we play this, at least the squashing is correct. It's just the bounce speed is wrong. Okay? So that is our timing and pivot point lesson for part 2. So at this point, since you are following, you want to save this so that you can participate in part 3.